morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is William Lam, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for OTT Pay. Thank you so much for your valuable time in joining me today to discuss innovation in retail payments. What can we learn from Asia? Before I begin, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Hong Kong and moved to Toronto with my immediate family when I was 12 years old. The first thing that I noticed when I moved to Toronto was that I need to purchase a discount TTC student tickets in school. So I would carry a lot of change from my parents and bring it to school. And I was a careless boy. I'm still very careless right now. What I usually end up doing is that I would rip the tickets in half or lose the entire stack of 10 tickets in total. And my mother would get really, really disappointed at me. I was just thinking to myself, it's like, why couldn't the TTC launch an octopus card system similar to what they have in China, in Hong Kong? So the octopus card system, for those of you who are not familiar with it, was launched in 1997. It processed over 14 million transactions a day, and it's being used by over 99% of the population in Hong Kong. So as a kid, I was able to pay for my subway rides. I was able to buy a bottle of Coke from the convenience stores. That was really life-changing for me. And that's when I realized technology does change life, and I fall in love with innovations. And I've traveled quite extensively over the years, especially back to Asia. Every country I visit, every time I go back, I'm in awe of how innovative all the solutions are. This is especially true in the past 5-10 years, where the payment space has progressed quite quickly in Asia. So I'm going to say that China right now is leading the pack with many fintechs that are trying to get a piece of the pie of this very lucrative Asian market. So I think one of the hardest things to change is really about consumer behavior. For better or for worse, Asian consumers are far more inclined to adopt fintech products. In particular, China and India, the two most populous nations in the world, have more than half of the adult consumers that said they use the fintech services regularly. Moving to the middle of the pack, we have the US, Hong Kong, and South Korea, who are on par with the average that 1/3 of the populations are regularly using fintech services. For Canada, we are third from the bottom with 18% adoption rate, and Japan is even worse at 14%. And we'll address both of these figures in a little bit later in the presentation. Let's do a little bit of quick math. At 69% of the Chinese population and 52% of the India population, we're talking about 1.7 billion digitally enabled users who are regularly using fintech products. Applying the same math here for the Canadian population of 37 million people with 18% of the population, that's 6.6 million. So the digitally enabled and tech-savvy populations in China and India are 255 times more than that of Canada. So we've just established two things here. The market in Asia is enormous, and that Asia users in general have Asia countries in general have a much easier group of end users to deal with. And if I were to make a third observation, looking at the glass half full, Canadians are very satisfied with the services and their interactions with existing financial institutions. Don't fix what's not broken. With such a market opportunity, investors across the globe are eyeing business opportunities in fintech. As of Q2 2018, Asia, an already established player in the fintech space, continue to close more funding deals, reaching 133 venture capitalist-backed deals in Q2 alone. That increase is closing up the gaps with the number of deals in North America. In the first half of 2018, about $12 billion flow into venture capital-backed fintechs, and moving a third of it went into companies in Asia. So looking at this breakdown here, there were a lot of mega fintech deals that catapult China to be the top destination in the world for venture capitalist money in 2006. It fell in 2017 as investor pull back after all these gigantic size deals. But in 2018, activities picked up again. And what we see specifically is that there was a round C funding held with Alipay. They raised over $14 billion, making Alipay the most valuable private company with a valuation of over $150 billion. And but there is still, good $2 billion to flow around with a lot of fintechs that are happening in Asia. And that, in comparison, Canada funds a total of $3.5 billion in 2018. Not bad, but I think we could do a lot better. And comparing all that activities, again, excluding the deals with Alipay, Asia remains the second largest market in terms of dollar investments into fintechs. And in recent months, there is more investment made to countries like Malaysia, Indonesia. So it's no longer just China and India who dominates the markets. There's a lot of the adjacent countries, developing countries who still look for that financial stability and financial inclusion around Asia. 29 fintechs reached the unicorn status with over $1 billion in valuation. We as a payment professional have heard of Stripe, Symphony, Clover, Credit Karma. We even get a lot of exposure to TransferWise funding circles in Europe, though we don't pay much attention about fintech in Asia other than WeChat Pay, Alipay, and Paytm. Lu.com, has anyone heard of Lu.com before? Okay. Yeah, so Lu.com is just another online investment banking platform in China that just reached a valuation of $18.5 billion. Put things into perspective, that's about the market cap of 10 Hudson's Bay company. So I think we all owe to ourselves that as we look for innovations, as we look beyond North America, we should pay attention to some of these unicorns in Asia as well. So what have we talked about here? So in Asia, they are working with a digital savvy base that isn't afraid to try new technology. There's also a healthy inflow of investments making fintech companies, keeping them the ability to innovate. And we're not just talking about in recent quarters. That has happened in the past 5 to 10 years already. So today, I would like to share with you what I have learned personally as well as professionally as a payment professional in Canada about the market in Asia. So 15 years ago, I lived in Japan for a year. There are quite a few things that really fascinated me, although they might not be all payments related, but I just want to share that with you. On the first picture that you see on the left there, this is the entrance into the subway system. It doesn't matter how you put that magnetic tickets in, upside down, diagonal, it always come back out in the right orientation. That to me, I'm still fascinated by this. Like, how do they actually do that? And I also learned how to eat standing up. In business districts, especially in Tokyo and Osaka, a lot of businessmen, they are looking for efficiency. They are looking to save that extra minutes. So I learned how to stand up and be able to chow down my bowl of udon in about 2 minutes. And I also learned the proper way of bowing. So when I am with my peers, I know how to do a little head nods. When I'm talking to a superiors, I do that 15 to 20 degrees bow. And when I am talking to the president of a company or my elderly, I would do that 90-degree. And assume that if I have to do a public apology in front of a lot of cameras, I need to practice yoga 2 years in advance, knowing how to put my head in between my legs. I can't do that right now. So all jokes aside, and despite all the great things that are happening in China with such a rich heritage and culture, Japan is dealing with a few unfavorable trends for fintech and mobile payments. They're dealing with an aging population and negative interest rates. So people are holding on to cash to prevent, erosions into their savings. Cashless transactions account for only 18% of personal expenditures in Japan. 45% of that is in the US and over 60% in China. So if you think the Japanese lost their mojo and don't know how to innovate anymore, you might want to place your bets with Alipay and WeChat Pay, who has the experience, who has done it successfully to push for mobile payments in China as they try to expand overseas. Allegedly, WeChat Pay and Alipay are looking to gain a domestic banking license in Japan as they look beyond servicing the Chinese tourists going to Japan. So if you think Rakuten, which is the largest e-com platform in Japan and one of the top 10 largest companies in the world, can replicate a success like Alibaba, that's where you want to place your money. Line, on the other hand, with 80 active users, they want to be the super app of like WeChat. And are they able to do so? And if so, that's where you would kind of place your bets. And I think the executives at Line also put money where their mouth is at. Through 2021, they will invest over $100 billion yen into further developing Line Pay, which is quite incredible. But what's most intriguing to me is the recent development that Mizuho Bank, one of the largest and oldest banking institutions in Japan, they partnered with over 60 financial institutions to launch something called J-Coin Pay. So despite what the name says, it's not really a cryptocurrency. It's very similar to Alipay and WeChat Pay. It's really based on the QR code pay based system. So Japan really has one of the most cash intensive economies in the world, and the Japanese government has the desire to push for electronic fund transfers just in time before the 2020 Tokyo Olympics game. So to me is that I'm very interested to see how this map will play out in a couple of years. Will Mizuho, with a strong history in Japan, really win out, or will one of these e-com platforms be able to replicate the success that we see in China, or will Alipay and WeChat Pay acquire domestic license and expand their global footprints? Only time will tell at the moment. And I think when I look at this, right, not going to go into the innovation around QR codes. I'll talk a little about that as we get to China. But one interesting thing is that there are over 55,000 convenience stores in Japan. A lot of the older generations, they still like to make purchase payments. What that means is that I can order things online, I can order things through mail, and when it comes to when it arrives at the convenience stores, as I'm paying for that parcel, I would actually go up and pay for that, at the point of sale, versus paying for that at the time of order, and that accounts for still 37% of the purchases. So as the innovations are happening around QR code mobile payments, Japanese fintech players also need to take into consideration the older generations who might not be adapting to the newer type of technologies. So moving on to Singapore. So Singapore, very similar to Japan, a developed country with mature banking infrastructures and over 90% of the adult population that has a bank card. QR code payments started popping up in recent years. There were over 20 QR code payment schemes that were available. The picture on the left shows one of the doors of a typical vendor in Singapore. It gets busy and ugly very quickly. NET stands for Network of Electronic Transfer of Singapore. Very similar to Interac in Canada. They play a crucial role in the development and innovations of payments over the last few decades in Singapore. It was founded in 1985 and operated by 5 major banks in Singapore. They continue to innovate, introducing the pin and chip in the 90s and contactless payments in the 2000s. In 2006, they came up with the Nets QR code. Nets estimate that the cost to acquire each merchant is roughly $500 USD, and that the investment of the infrastructure, but plus the cost to acquire 6,000 merchants were over $10 million. Is really expensive, or it's not an inexpensive exercise as we push out a new payment technology. The funny thing is that the government also stepped in late last year. So the Monetary Authority of Singapore stepped in and launched the world's first unified QR code in September of 2018. So it's monumental, with 27 payment schemes under one QR code. It includes some of the biggest names that we know of, including Visa, MasterCard, WeChat Pay, and Alipay. And that's what you see on the right side of the screen. The plan for Singapore is to tackle the local first. They want to make sure that everyone in Singapore has access to one simple, unified QR code payment. Then they would expand regionally into India and into Thailand. Compatibly with neighboring countries is one of the main reasons why the Singapore government stepped in to launch this unified QR code. Now, going into Korea, who can talk about South Korea without the mention of Samsung? But before you think that the Japanese and the Koreans and Singaporeans are really well served by the banks and the payment industry, Koreans on average have 5.3 cards per inhabitant. And Samsung, as being the largest South Korea business conglomerate, they are in a really well positioned to capture that market, with 55% of end users use one of Samsung's phones. And Samsung Pay, while they made some noise here in North America, and across the globe, they have already processed over $17 billion as of April of 2018. Okay. And actually, what's interesting that's happening in Korea as well is something called the Zero Pay. So Zero Pay is actually a state-owned or state-driven initiative, and the objective of it is to lower the cost of payments for a lot of the merchants, including mom-and-pop shop. There's also a strong incentive associated with it for end users, with up to 40% tax reductions if you use Zero Pay to pay for your purchases versus all other payment types. Kakao Pay, very similar to Line, very similar to WeChat. They have a very strong user group, and they have a lot of active users. When Zero Pay first came out, they were the first one to discard that they are not going into that payment scheme. But lately, they also have expressed interest that they might be going to partner up with Zero Pay, and that might really change the landscape of how QR code would play out, and QR code payment would play out in Korea. And last but not least, Alipay, with the singular focus right now in South Korea, is around Chinese tourists. And as tourists, a lot of us shop at duty-free shop. They enable the first paperless tax returns with South Korea. So every time that you buy it with Alipay at a duty-free shop, or at retail stores in Korea, you'll be able to get tax returns without filing a single piece of papers. And that to me is an innovation of its type. So, of course, we have to talk about China. And when we talk about China, there are the three giants in the payment space, including UnionPay, Alipay, as well as WeChat Pay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Alipay first. I think a lot of us know a lot about Alipay already. Over 1 billion users worldwide, with 700 million based out of China. They covers 54 countries in terms of acceptance, and there are a lot of auxiliary financial products or services that are coming out of the Alipay app. And I can talk to you a little bit about and share with you a little bit about my personal experience with Alipay. And with WeChat Pay, it's again, over 1 billion active users. And active users on WeChat Pay, they open their app more than 35 times. I've not seen another app that is more engaging than WeChat Pay. Similarly, it does cover close to 50 countries worldwide. They have something called the mini programs, and I think to us Canadians, we love going to app stores to download different apps and which fill up the homepage. In China, WeChat is really the super app where you're able to download a lot of the mini programs, a few hundred kilobytes, and you have access to e-com sites, you have access to hospital registrations. So it's really, really powerful without leaving the WeChat ecosystem. UnionPay, you might think that they are a dinosaur, they're only card-based, but don't discount them. Don't discount them. They have already issued over 7 billion cards, with over 51 countries, and they have decades of experience building up the merchant acceptance footprints when compared to that of Alipay and WeChat Pay. Very recently, I think that you have heard that UnionPay also launched their own QR code payment system, and that is really in direct response to the success that WeChat Pay and Alipay have in the market. I would say that UnionPay, while they're late to the game with QR code, there is a lot that going on for such a large organization with deep histories with a lot of countries around the world. And WeChat Pay and Alipay, I think we've all learned and talk about it. And I just want to share some of my experience with you as I was traveling in China. So I think 3 years ago, in 2016, was the first time that I went back to China, to Shanghai for a conference. I was really hungry, so I grabbed a bowl of noodles on the way to another meeting. And that bowl of noodle was inexpensive. It was operated by just a street vendor. That man was probably in his 50s and 60s. He seems a little grumpy, but the bowl of noodle was really, really delicious. So because of what I've learned in Japan, I was able to chow that down in 2 minutes or less. After chowing it down, I whip out some cash. So I had $100 renminbi in my hand, which is about $20 Canadians. So I give it to him, and all he did to me was keep pointing to the QR code, Alipay, WeChat Pay. And I just told him, I don't have it, so what do you want me to do? So he simply just waved me out the door. So I was like, oh, that's pretty sweet, score, free bowl of noodles. So I tried that again at another vendor. It's later in the night. That was not successful. I had to pay for the other meal, unfortunately. But that's how persuasive, pervasive the cashless behavior it is in China. To a point where last year there were over 600 case reviews that were reported to the Chinese government. The Chinese government needs to step in and say that cash is still accepted, as a form of payments. So people should still accept it. And that's very different, right, from what we see in some of the countries. The closest to us would be New Jersey, where there's a state law that they would discourage or continue to encourage the use of cash. It's a very different state of mind, and that was 3 years ago. Zooming into just 2 months ago when I was in China, this is what happens. When I was in my hotel, I was calling my friends already. Well, actually, I didn't call. I was actually WeChatting. It's like, hey, where are we meeting for lunch? So we're going to this place, and there is a mini program launched by this vendor. And when I launched this mini program, I could order the food that I want, and my friends have already done that. And within the app itself, I'm also able to hail a cab. So I walk downstairs, hail a cab, go inside. Everything is paid for. As I walk into the restaurants, scan the QR code on the table. They know that I'm already there, and food is being served without talking to one single wait staff there. I thought that was the most awkward experience. Like, oh my gosh, what have I become? Have I become antisocial? Do I not like to interact with my with human beings? That's not true, right? Is that as I walk in, as I adopt to this whole WeChat ecosystem, I feel that I'm spending more time with people that I really want to talk to, really want to connect, as I'm at the dinner table. And that is that is also true, right? I think in Canadian landscape, that's hey, if I start ordering things like right now, I think a lot of people will look at me awkward. But let's not limit ourselves to the current state. In 3-5 years, we might get to that. With Alipay, on the other hand, I don't use it for day-to-day, and that's not what the platform is for. But it's really something that help a lot of, especially middle class, where if I have some money, saved aside or already in my wallet, I could get a really high yield in terms of interest rates if I were to able to save it. As a Canadian, I look at it as like, yeah, sure, I have access to that too. Tangerine offer me high yields. A lot of other banks offer me high yields as I make new deposits. But the engaging part is that it's all digital. Every day, I'm able to see down to dollars and cents as to how much interest I accumulate. And that is really cool. And the ability for them to actually round up, round down on purchases and able to adjudicate credit instantly is something that us as professionals in North America can only dream for. But I would say that we're not too far away. I think that there are a few fintechs out here that are already doing it, and I'm hoping that it will enhance the life of Canadians. One other thing, then, a shameless plug to my son Henry, who's at the bottom, right corner there in that shopping cart. So 2 months ago, went to Walmart, did a little bit of shopping with my family, and they enabled in-aisle checkout. And in-aisle checkout is something that, at least for me, I've heard from merchants in North America for over 10 years now. They have enabled that, and I was really looking forward to trying that out. Actually, just last year in 2018, I was looking forward to trying that out at Walmart Canada, where they enable scan and go pilots at selected locations. So as I walk in, there's a wall of these symbol scanners. You need to pick one of those up as along with one of the shopping carts. So I did that. I was really excited as I tried to be a cashier and a shopper at the same time. And when I tried to scan, it did not work. And I asked one of the associates, like, hey, how does this work? Can you help me out? And the reply to me, very disappointedly, was, yeah, they don't work. Just line up. Yeah, so it was a negative customer experience, and there was actually a lot of financial investments in terms of hardware infrastructures being set up. And I think that as we think about innovations in North America, we do tend to overinvest in the upfront infrastructure a lot more, whereas in China or in a lot of the developing countries, they think about it more microly. It's like, okay, how do I launch a solution most efficiently and effectively? So with Walmart in China, every smartphone turns into a scanner using WeChat mini program. So as I was walking through the aisle, I know exactly how to operate my smartphone. I feel familiar with it because I touch that thing at least 1,000 times a day. All I have to do is to activate that camera with that phone and just scan the barcodes along the way. As I walk out, and what you see on the screen there are dedicated aisle where I just need to line up at one of the scanners to present a barcode saying the number of items that I bought and the total amount. As soon as I scan that, payment is complete. Receipt comes out as someone was helping me to bag a lot of the merchandise that I was buying. That experience was not as sexy as someone like an Amazon Go. I just walk in and walk out with the merchandise that I want. But that experience was pretty seamless. I feel engaged, and I feel that the technology was working. Are we able to launch something like this in Canada? Are we able to learn a lot of what we see in Asia and really apply to our day-to-day thinking as payment professionals? So, few thoughts that I want to share, right? QR codes, right, is really a platform agnostic solution. And it's becoming more relevant as a way to exchange enriched data above and beyond just payments. So we're not just talking about payments here. As you walk into a parking lot, you use QR codes to that might recognize your card. And you also use QR code to check in at hotels. It's above and beyond just a QR code. With mobile phones at the center again, will telco take another swing at offering payments in Canada? Again, looking back at 2011 when Rogers applied for that banking license, they have over 10 million subscribers. I thought that was a pretty big news in Canada as well. Could the telcos come in again and make another wave of disruption as mobile phones again become smarter and more relevant? How will the various new payment schemes impact Canadians traveling abroad? I was lucky enough to have access to WeChat Pay and Alipay. A lot of my friends, they don't, right? As they travel to China, it's actually impacting the experience that they have. So when I walk into an attractions, I can buy my ticket in advance and walk right in with that QR code. Whereas if someone doesn't have Alipay or WeChat Pay, they have to line up and get that old-fashioned ticket, and that does impact their customer experience. So I think we should think about not just like, hey, do we launch QR code here in Canada? More about how do we plug ourselves into the role as we become more of a global economy. And push for technology is really expensive. I was able to find some facts from the Singapore experience, but I can tell you that as OTT Pay, we push for WeChat Pay and Alipay here in Canada. It's not an inexpensive exercise, but we're willing to do it, and we want to be as a fintech innovator here in Canada. And finally, right, success is not really defined by how mature the technology is. It's really defined by what type of customer experience are you delivering, and are the experience able to solve some of the pain points? As we think about WeChat Pay, Alipay, Line Pay, all these innovators that are across the globe and now in Asia, they always focus on solutions that are really keen to solving a customer pain points. So I think we should apply that as well. So finally, I think that QR code in Canada is something that we should consider. And there are so many different parties that will need to come together as we try to think about the solutions. Is beyond just a mere presentment layer, is really a way for us to provide a better experience for Canadians and really future-proof ourselves in the world. So thank you so much for your valuable time today. I'm very happy and excited to share some of the learnings that I have with you, with all of you. Would love to further chat. If you don't get a chance to connect right after this session, we're at booth number 7 right downstairs. Thank you, everyone.